back to the How to Podcast series. This is Dave. I have a question. I'm a guitar player, and when I am introduced to an amazing guitar player who is far beyond where I'm at, even though I've been playing for many years, I struggle sometimes. I have one of two responses. Either I'm inspired to go home or open my guitar case and start to play and practice, or I feel like giving up. Like, I'll never play again because that person is so great. I'll never have or be that person. Have you ever felt that for your podcast? Have you ever felt that for a book you're writing? Have you ever felt that about your job, life in general? And talk about not the imposter syndrome, but the imposter phenomenon, and why there's a difference on the How to Podcast series. Here we go. So I'm listening to this guitar player, and he's doing things that I have no idea how he just did that, for example. You know, okay, come on. Right? When somebody's a master at something, it can be quite intimidating. Here I am with my 3 chords, and this guy steps up and just blows everyone away. And I'm like, oh, is there any hope for me? And like I said at the beginning, sometimes when you meet somebody that's so captivating and inspiring and can do things that you can't do, quite often the response is to back away or get discouraged, get down on yourself. Well, their podcast has got this many listeners. They've got this great intro. They're really good as a host. They do this, they do that. They're much better. I'm much worse. It's a circle. And I've been doing some reading. I love psychology. I went to school. I have a bachelor's in theology, but my main focus was educational psychology. So anything to do with how people learn or how people grow, that's my thing. That's what I really like. I love unpacking that and then using that knowledge to help other people get past some of the hurdles that they're in. And it's very popular here in imposter syndrome, but I like imposter phenomenon. And there's a difference, and I'll explain why. I've been doing some reading from Alfred Adler. He was born in like 1870, and he's an Austrian psychologist. And there's some stuff that I've been learning as I go through his stuff. And when we talk imposter syndrome, the word syndrome is more of a medical term. And you'll hear that in medical speak. It's more of a medical model with an organic cause, is what I'm seeing, compared to phenomenon, which is a focus more on the experience and not so much the cause. So when we talk about having an imposter phenomenon, it's more about what you're experiencing than the trigger. Okay, does that make sense? These deep feelings that we have from time to time of inferiority, it's actually quite a universal human experience for so many. I know I'm painting with a wide brush, but you'd be surprised. Even the most highly experienced and amazing people out there who seem like they have the whole world together still can struggle from this imposter phenomenon. Professionals, people we look up to, people we admire, people we would love to get their autograph or have them on our podcast or speak to them about how amazing they are. We're super fans. of who they are. Many of us, still struggle with the imposter phenomenon. Like I talk about with the guitar, like I watch these great guitar players, and like I said before, there's times, quite honestly, where I am inspired. I'm like, man, that person is amazing. She can just play like what? How did he do that? And I want to unpack it. I want to learn. I want to grow. And then the opposite happens, where I see somebody and I'm like, I give up. Sell my gear. That's it. I've been playing for 45 years, but in 45 years, I've never been able to do what they've done. And they've been doing this for an hour and a half. Like it just seems like there's some people out there who just have it. And you get down on yourself sometimes because you think that you'll never achieve someone else's greatness. And I heard somebody say, never try to emulate someone else's highlights, because you don't know all the downsides and all the lessons and all the practice and all the effort it took to have that highlight. And all we want to do in our culture today is capture the highlights. It's Instagram, it's TikTok, it's Twitter, it's social media. I'm not going to show you my messy workbench. I'm not going to show you my unmade bed. I'm not going to show you all the things where I've failed or I don't feel like I'm succeeding the way others have. I only show you my highlights. And that seems to be one of the things that feeds into our imposter phenomenon. It's interesting because from what I've been reading is women tend to acknowledge and discuss their feelings of inferiority more than men do, but that doesn't mean that men don't have these feelings. Women tend to be better at expressing them. So think about your podcast. Make a list right now. What are some of the things in your head about your podcast that make you feel inferior to other podcasts? Scary. How is that other podcast better than yours? And then flip it around and realize that there are people looking at your podcast and they're like, oh, that person, they got it all together. They have a podcast. I don't even have one. I'll never do this. There's no way I can be as good as you. And meanwhile, you're thinking, do they know how many times I edit my podcast? Do they know how many times I've failed? Do they know about every bad comment I've ever heard or read about my work? Do they know how hard it is for me? The same thing that you're feeling about others are feeling about your work. I have my Living the Next Chapter podcast, and I had an author on it. She was talking about a moment in time where she was sitting at the lights, listening to an author, and she felt inspired to write. So she went home and started writing her book. And it was that moment that inspired her to go forward, not to back up. She didn't have the experience of that person's better than me, I'll never be that good. She said, no, I'm going to go home and do this. And I said to her, do you realize now that you have a book as a new author, that somebody listening to this podcast right now might be in their car listening to your voice and you talk about your new book, and they are going to do the exact same thing you just did when you heard about that book and you went home to write? Your story inspires the next person. And no matter how you feel about your podcast right now, whether you feel like you're doing well, you're not doing well at all, whether you feel inspired, whether you feel defeated, don't give up. Don't stop because someone else is greater. I'm speaking to myself as a guitar player. Dave, don't give up because there's so many great guitar players. You may never be Eddie Van Halen. You may never be these amazing musicians out there that you hear. But let their journey inspire you. Instead of the results, focus on the journey. How did they get there? Unpack it, develop it for yourself, and apply it to your life. Again, podcast, writing a book, writing a song, how you treat your family, how you do at work. What inspires you about someone else, and how can you replicate that or recreate that for yourself without focusing on the result? Focus on the path, the journey to get there. This whole thing about feeling like a fake, feeling like if anybody knew how horrible I really am in real life, that I really don't have it all together. Actors, musicians, authors, speakers, teachers, a lot of people really are 1 or 2 steps ahead of their students. That's it. 1 or 2 steps. As long as you can stay ahead of them, you can lead. You don't have to have everything figured out. And that's the biggest thing I learned as a parent, with my relationship with my wife, is that I need to be growing. I need to be better than I was yesterday. And that path will help me to be a little bit stronger. High achievers experience this imposter phenomenon. And my hope today in this podcast, and with all the episodes we put out, is that you will find a moment of inspiration where you go, okay, I can do this. I do have enough right now. I am growing. I am learning. I'm investing in myself. I'm doing everything I can. But everything I need, I have. I have the willpower. I have the desire. I have the passion. I have the tools. I just need to hit record. And in podcasting, the community is great. There's some amazing people that can surround you and support you. One of my mentors that I look up to, Dave Jackson, from the School of Podcasting. He has multiple podcasts, but Dave has been doing this for a long time. Back in the day, as he says. Dave is a superstar in my books. I'll put a link to his stuff in the show notes. But find somebody that makes you better. And if you focus on the people that you think you'll never be like, then that's true. You'll never be like them. If you want something you've never had, you have to do something you've never done. And my challenge to you and all my podcasting friends is find people who fill your cup. And when your cup is full, fill someone else's cup. Help them. And in helping somebody else, you'll grow because you'll be able to come up and share your experiences. That's why we're doing the co-hosting on the How to Podcast series. As you share your experience with others, even if you're new, even if you just have questions, you're part of the conversation. And in being part of the conversation, others listening will learn from you. And in learning from you, they grow. And as others grow around you, you grow. And I think that's one of the great things about our community. If you need help, if you need somebody to kind of listen, if you want to practice doing an interview, if you just want somebody to bounce off your podcast and you have questions about it, again, I have 6 weekly podcasts that I do. I love doing podcasting. I love interviewing. And I love helping people. I would love to help you. Go over to my website. It's in the show notes. Leave me a voicemail on my webpage. Drop me a message. However you want to reach out to me. All my contact information is there. And let's have a conversation. And if I can't answer your question, I know people who can. And I'd love to connect you with them as well. That's what we're all about. Thanks for listening to the How to Podcast series. And remember, the imposter phenomenon, it's not a syndrome, it's a phenomenon. And it's based on the experience and not so much the cause. I got to get my guitar out and now go practice after hearing this clip I played earlier. There's so much to learn. And we just started. Thanks for listening. How to Podcast series. Please share this with one other podcaster that you think is struggling, having a hard time, and let's help each other. Love to hear from you. Please send me a message and be part of the conversation. Thanks. Enjoy your podcasting journey, and we'll talk again soon.